Hi everybody, it is Jaquie Rogers and I'm here to talk to you all a little bit today, just briefly, about my upcoming workshop series and subsequent events titled Life Skill Coaching for Teens, Creating Safe Spaces for Teens to Practice Growing Up. I'm really excited about this because this is the work that I've been doing for the past 8 years, focusing on positive youth development and preparing them by equipping them with the tools and creating intentional spaces for them to apply these tools safely, both within the throes of conflict and outside of them. And so what I found in working with some groups of students for 4 years, meaning that I followed them, the students that I worked with for 4 years, I followed them from 9th grade through high school graduation, and currently I'm functioning in the middle school space and have worked with students from the 6th grade through 8th grade year. And what I found to be true is that when we are intentional about consistently repeating these lessons, applying them to real life situations, making room for teens to better understand themselves and how their mind and their subsequent emotions tend to work. It's been really neat to see how they grow and how they go from learning these skills to practicing these skills to naturally calling upon and applying these skills during times of crisis and challenge. And so that being said, I just wanted to talk a little bit today about how the adolescent brain works. Because what I'll hear a lot of adults oftentimes saying about teens is that they should have been more mature, or they act like children, or they should know better than that. And the ability to know or discern the difference between right and wrong doesn't automatically guarantee that we're prepared with the skills necessary to respond in the healthiest of ways. That takes practice, and that's because the brain is a muscle. But let me rewind, because we'll get back to the brain being a muscle in a moment. The amygdala is the part of the brain that's responsible for recognizing emotions and registering emotions within the body. However, the amygdala is not equipped like the prefrontal cortex to have us stop before we act on those emotions. But the amygdala develops earlier than the prefrontal cortex. So we're feeling a lot sooner than we're able to register and compartmentalize and redirect those emotions or channel those emotions into healthier ways of responding. So we're feeling, and that's why oftentimes we see younger kids hit when they're mad, even after you've told them time and time again, it's not okay to hit, it's not okay to do that. We'll still see them acknowledge that it's wrong, and might even go as far as saying they won't do it again, but then turn around and do it again. And the part of our brain that allows us to actually stop and contemplate and act on the difference between right and wrong and make decisions accordingly is the prefrontal cortex. And that part of our brain doesn't even fully develop until as early as 25 years of age. 25. And I'll say that for me, it was like a life shift happened for me at the age of 30. And prior to turning 30, I'd heard several people say it's something about turning 30 and being able to make connections between the decisions you're making and the challenges you're facing and long-term outcomes, and making decisions based on how they will impact in the long term. Y'all hear me when I say I was 30. And so a lot of the students that I'm teaching are 17, 18, 19 years younger than me. And so as an adult walking in and expecting that they'll be able to manage and handle their emotions in the way that is expected of me as an adult, might be a little naive. And so because the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed during adolescence, which research has said spans the age of 13 to 19, give or take a couple of years on each end, they aren't fully capable of realizing the long-term impacts of some of the choices that they're making. And so that might mean that they're acting on impulse, that they might misread or misinterpret social cues, that they might get into all kinds of accidents, that they might fight a lot easier, that they could engage in dangerous or risky behaviors repetitively. They aren't thinking before they act. They don't really pause to consider the consequences of their actions before they move. But routing back around to this fact that the brain is a muscle, just like the muscles all over our body, when you work them and when you exercise them, they get stronger and they get used to the way that you're working them. And in that same frame with the brain, even when we're functioning outside of crisis, if we make space and time to address how we respond in crisis and how we process different situations and emotions that we feel when we find ourselves in challenging situations, we're better prepared to handle them. For younger people, for adolescents and younger, those emotions are directly tied to the action, right? And the action is propelled by the emotion. And there's very little that happens in between feeling and doing. But as we practice, and the brain eventually learns that, okay, when I feel this, this is how I act. I feel it and I do this. But in practicing healthy ways to cope in situations where we are in crisis, what the brain will learn to do as we practice those responses is say, I feel, okay, let's pull from the options I have about how I could respond in this situation, right? I could walk away. I could tell the person that we need to talk about this a little later because I'm not in a good space to have this conversation right now. I can sit back and I can process, okay, these are the choices I have. These are the consequences of those choices. And based on those consequences, these are the decisions that I should make right now, right? It allows us to pause, and then it gives us options to pull from. And that doesn't mean that there won't be instances where we slip up and are triggered by some form of stimuli and we respond. But eventually, as we practice healthier responses, our natural responses will become healthier. And so that is where I find my passion in teaching students and facilitating that growth and answering those critical questions that they have about, well, what if somebody just ain't doing me right? Like, what if I'm absolutely justified in my response? And so really processing with these students concepts around the end game and recognizing the long-term impacts of the choices that we make, connecting the choices we make to long-term goals that we've set for ourselves. So not just teaching or practicing life skills, but recognizing how these life skills are all tied to one another and can collectively build up a solid foundation for us to move through life, working with others productively, recognizing situations that are not healthy for us and ways to cope with those situations, as well as remove ourselves from those situations, right? It's about knowing that you have options, and that the immediate response you want to project on the situation that you're going through might not be the healthiest, and that there are ways to work around those responses. And so, that being said, I will leave that with you today. If you have any questions about brain development or why spaces like this are necessary or ways that you can even sign your child up, I would encourage you to email me at jaquie@educationunblurred.com. Additionally, on the latter thing that I mentioned, if you are interested in signing up for our first workshop, Can We Talk? For teens who are interested in strengthening their communication skills, I encourage you to do so on Eventbrite. Additionally, I want to mention one last thing. This isn't just about working with the teens, right? It's not you bring your kid to the workshop, they leave, and that's that. We will send you home with tangible activities and things that you can work on outside of the workshops to help build upon and strengthen those skills and have those critical conversations with your teens about expectations and life skills and healthy ways of coping. With that being said, I look forward to hearing from you. I hope to work with you and your teens very soon, and I appreciate the opportunity. Take care.